Become one of the best players of his generation. He grew before our eyes, and we all know how to pronounce that last name now, the one that intimidated all the broadcasters. And of course, at number one, the obvious one, that is Nikola Jokic, a guy who, when he was drafted on draft night in the second round, not only was he not in the building, he wasn't on TV. You know what was when he was drafted? A Taco Bell commercial. Yo quiero Taco Bell. Yep. Yo quiero Nikola Jokic. That's what they wanted in Denver, and he has become an all-time great. A second-round pick, somebody that no one knew who this guy was. He shows up. He had to kick a Pepsi. He had a Pepsi habit. He had to kick that, got himself into great shape, and now on the verge of winning a championship.
The announcement came on a bottom line there while the Taco Bell commercial was running that Jokic was picked by the Nuggets. What do you think of this list? Because this is incredible right here.
The player the Dallas Mavericks let go, and they miss him dearly. He has turned into a fantastic scorer at the point guard position. We move on to number 4. How about this guy, Kawhi Leonard? Kawhi Leonard was a guy that Jimmer Fredette outplayed him in a college basketball game. Yes, a Jimmer Fredette mention because they went head-to-head one game, San Diego State versus BYU, and I watched that game, and Jimmer he couldn't stop Jimmer. Then he became one of the best defensive players in the league, a finals MVP, a 2-time champion. So Kawhi Leonard at a 15th pick has become a great player. Okay, so we move on to number 3. How about Jimmy Buckets? The 30th pick in the draft in 2011, which, by the way, was a very unsung draft. He gets taken 30th overall, the very last first-round pick by the Chicago Bulls. And boy, this is a Tom Thibodeau, this is a monster he created. They bring him in, and he becomes, with the Chicago Bulls, a terrific player. Eventually a most improved player in the NBA. A couple of years later, he then since bounced around. You had him in Philly.
He got to see what the Nuggets are doing to him. He has an opportunity to make the necessary adjustments. He'll be back in game 2.
We'll see if Himmy's mad in game 2. The Nuggets will sweep the Heat. Is that McNuts?
That is also McNuts. There's entirely too much pride, too much culture for that to happen. And if they hit some threes yesterday, would we be having a slightly different conversation? It is certainly in the realm of possibility.
Jokic, more dangerous as a passer than a scorer. Is that McNuts?
That is not McNuts. 21 touches in the first half resulted in 33 points. Even when this man touches the basketball, good things happen. And that's not a full-blown assist necessarily. That's not McNuts at all. We already saw in the fourth of this ball game that allowing Jokic to be a scorer put a little bit of a drudge on the Nuggets offense. But I wouldn't just let him score either, though.
That is the key, right? Completely different player in the fourth quarter. And, of course, he led all scorers with 27 points last night, even when he had just 5 shots in the first 3 quarters. Back here with Alan as well as Monica. All right, time to break down things. Break down for us why Jokic is so tough to defend.
All right, let's do it. We're going over to the green screen. Shout out to Dano. We're getting into the McNuts and bolts of it all, my friends. This was one of my favorite plays from this ball game. Again, 2-man game is how it starts. You got Jokic, you got Murray. Jokic gets this basketball, guys, right? Just look at this. First of all, to the ring conversation, right? And so then you're talking Nikola Jokic may be on the brink of it. Jimmy hasn't quite done it, although he's been to the finals. So, yeah, just on the rings, I think you got to evaluate 5. But I love that selection.
I'm going recency bias. I'm putting Brunson on the list.
Listen, we wear the orange and blue on our sleeves.
I see it. I understand. By the way, let's go to number 3 on this list. Jimmy Butler, averaging more than 31 points. Player has the most points scored or assisted on in their NBA Finals debut. Wendy, your answer is?
Well, I've been thinking about the Philly flavor to this show, Kevin. And I don't know how many assists he had, but I remember Allen Iverson had an iconic Game 1 in his first and only finals in 2001. I think he had 48 points. I hope he had a few assists. That's my answer.
Yes, he did. How about that? Allen Iverson, a total of 61. That was the peak, of course, of Game 1 in the NBA Finals against the Lakers. Iverson scored or assisted on 61 of the Sixers' 107 points in Game 1, and they got that dub, and then it was Kobe and Shaq afterwards, and Tyronn Lue had the final laugh. Well done by you, Wendy, sticking with the theme of the show as we continue. Is that McNuts? It's time for that, and Playoff Jimmy has run out of gas. So is that McNuts or not?
That is 2 guys at this point. Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr. have both done a really good job from making threes at this point in the ballgame. So they get into a little bit of action. They're going to come. We're going to freeze it right here. Bam Adebayo is in such a tough spot. He knows the screen is here. He's got to get over this because technically he's guarding Jamal Murray here, who's been killing it from 3. But also, there's this space that he has to be mindful of in terms of helping Jokic or helping guard Jokic who could get into the paint. Now let me clear all this stuff up. We're going to play ball. Watch what happens. Great read, great pass. Jamal Murray able to knock down that three. And that's just Jokic being poised. A little bit later, watch this one. Again, draws that double team here. We'll freeze it. We'll get into this two-man action. When Jokic is going to set this screen, Jamal Murray's going to have a ton of options. But watch how this Heat defense collapses on Jamal Murray, right? He's going, this is that play, my bad. So this one, obviously, Jokic got the ball in the middle, and then Jeff Green scored. Here's the two-man game. My bad. Look at all of this space. Freeze it. Catching this ball with one.
Comp and the Patrick Mahomes thing, because just like you said, he looks slow.
Embiid, who, of course, needs a new head coach, and he got one yesterday. The Sixers introducing their new man. That is Nick Nurse, who won a title with the Raptors back in 2019. The biggest question is whether James Harden will return to Philly or decline his player option and go elsewhere. Now, here's longtime Philly reporter Howard Eskin asking Nurse about Harden's future. Listen to this.
Do you want James Harden back?
James Harden's a great player.
That didn't answer the question.
Well, I would say this is that James has a decision to make, and I'd be very happy if he came back. Yeah.
It's not Toronto, Nick. Welcome to Philadelphia.
So unemotional.
You've got to answer the question. And, of course, Howard Eskin will be the man that asks that question and then make sure he hears that answer. Wendy, you heard that answer. What's the latest you're hearing about whether or not Harden will be back in Philly?
And I think what makes the Nuggets unique is they know to move to the spots because he's going to find him. Jeff Green cut back door. Duncan Robinson looked away for a second to find a shooter, and Jeff Green snuck behind him and got that layup.
I mean, this has been a theme all morning. He's so deliberate, and he plays at his own pace. Mm-hmm. It's just wild, and sometimes it looks like he's in slow motion, especially when he's passing the ball. When you're a big man, sometimes we see these guys turnover. Somebody sticks their hand. He is in complete control. Is he the best passer in the NBA, Alan?
Yeah, he is, and statistically, he is certainly as well. In fact, in the playoffs, he has the most passes made per game, over 83. It's almost 20 more than the next player on average. But it's also the assisted to the points created, which is also leading the playoffs at 26.1. So it's not just passing, it's also the passes are resulting in positive things. And as I mentioned, and Monica pointed out too, when we show the passes, has he ever thrown a pass where you're like, wow, that's off? To see where they were going with this.
You were hearing Mike D'Antoni, Daryl Morey, the connection.
Was built around the Joel Embiid, like the team is built around Joel Embiid. When Nick Nurse was doing the interview process, he was in touch with Joel Embiid. Was the centerpiece of the organization. Harden is a supporting piece to that. He's a big supporting piece, an important supporting piece, but that was not the focus. And so now Daryl Morey has a plan on what he can present to James Harden. And not only James Harden, the other person who was on the dais yesterday, and that's Josh Harris, the team's owner. Josh Harris has to decide how much money that he's willing and how many years he's willing to offer James Harden. Those are all layers that have to come before Nick Nurse presents a plan to Harden for how he wants to play. All of these things are going to play out over the next month. I think that the thing that Nurse really wanted to drive home yesterday is their offer to James Harden is that we have a championship level team. He's not necessarily sure if he goes out in the marketplace, he can get something like that. That's going to be the offer. I don't get the impression that the playoffs when Embiid was dealing with his knee injury.
Yeah, you got a taste of that, of course, in Game 1 of Round 2 against the Celtics, and he was the star player. Can you maintain that if you want to have a deep playoff run? And that is the big question when we talk about fit and Nick Nurse and Joel Embiid. How do you think this fit is with Harden under Nick Nurse?
Yeah, by the way, how unemotional Nick Nurse was in that press conference in answering Howard's question, I mean, sure, we'd love to have him back, but there was no appeal to James Harden publicly there at all. So it was sort of like, you want to come back, great. If you don't, we'll move on. We've got other options that we can consider. We can live without you. What he made sure to say is, Joel Embiid, we can't live without you. So they prioritized Joel Embiid. Nick Nurse did as well. The two of them, I mean, they face each other a ton. They have had moments where they've gone at each other. They've had some trash talk going on. And so they're both competitors. I think Nick Nurse appreciates that. And Joel Embiid learned to appreciate it as he got to know
and Harden?
Well, one, I think James Harden deserves a ton of credit for shifting his game this year. Like, granted, it didn't pan out the way that it was designed to in Philly, but what he did is not necessarily easy to do. I don't know if it's a contract or the opportunity to win that will sell him. I can't answer that. But as far as Nurse and Embiid go, I like this and I like the pieces around him, right? You think back to that Raptors roster and some of the supporting staff that Kawhi Leonard had, some similarities there between Maxey and Tobias Harris, Norman Powell, some of those guys that were back on that roster. Obviously, he has won with a star in Kawhi Leonard. I like the pairing for Joel Embiid, but we got to see. This team shifts a great deal depending on what happens with James Harden. And
with the Miami Heat, his mentality.
5th triple-double while shooting at least 60% from the field this postseason. And any list that when you're with Wilt Chamberlain, you're in good company. Tying him with the late, great Wilt Chamberlain in 1967 for the most in a single playoff in NBA history. Also one shy of matching the most over an entire career. LeBron and Magic each have 6. And it's time for the fundamental list here as we have